Hi, I'm Cynthia Schiller. Please like and subscribe. We're going to talk about the types of psychopaths. And also, can somebody be narcissistic and also a psychopath? And the answer will be revealed. So, the primary psychopath, let's talk about that first. These are unemotional people. They are very callous, they like to manipulate, and they aren't always inclined to taking risks. So, they're a little bit different that way. But this type also doesn't have much use for feelings. They don't really like to use fear. They don't really have anxiety, and they definitely do not feel guilt or remorse. So that's your primary. Then you have your secondary, and the secondary psychopath is emotionally unstable. They have traits that lead to more of a criminal type of behavior, more than normal, and often they are impulsive. They seem emotional or anxious. They can be very hostile, aggressive towards others, and they can also use self-destructive techniques. So they are self-destructive. So they have a lot of risky behavior in the secondary sociopaths. But the distempered psychopath, did I say sociopath? Psychopath. The distempered psychopath. So this one is characterized by this intense, almost like craving for excitement in life. They do not like to be bored. They get very agitated when they're bored. So when that happens, they're likely to engage in anything from dangerous outings, sports activities, just anything. They don't really care, skydiving, things like that. So some of them can, going into bad neighborhoods, just whatever a risky, dangerous activity might be. So they're also known as hotheads because they can rage. And that rage that they go into is very dangerous to the people around them. But you have your charismatic psychopath. This one's a little bit different. Is likely to get their work done through aggressive lying. So we kind of see some similarities with narcissism. They like to make themselves look good. They are very likely to have high narcissistic traits as well in your charismatic, because there's the vulnerable and also the grandiose narcissist. And charismatic, that's kind of a trait too of a narcissist, if they're grandiose. So they can often be charming towards people, irresistible, pathological liars, and they're very manipulative. So the charismatic psychopath is very similar to a lot of the narcissists that we've dealt with. Egocentrically impulsive psychopath. This one loves to break rules, does not like to be bound by rules. So it's a rule breaker, and they often are manipulative. And this one will also show Machiavellian egocentricity. I'll do a video on Machiavellianism after this. It's hard for me to say. Can a person be both a psychopath and a sociopath? Sociopath. I'm all tongue-tied today. Sorry, guys. But this is the thing. Yes, they can be both a psychopath and a sociopath, but we need to know what the definition is, because there are differences in between them. So they're not the exact same clinical definitions. It's referring to a personality type, or any sort of antisocial personality disorder. So, sociopathy is generally the same name as antisocial personality behavior. So they're kind of used interchangeably. APD, antisocial personality, or sociopath. So this is characterized by the inability of a person to stay within the social norms. They like to do their own thing. And they have complete disregard for interpersonal relationships or the people around them. So they just like to do their own thing. They don't care what the consequences are. They definitely don't care about people's feelings. But psychopathy is a little different. It's considered a more criminal or dangerous version of sociopathy. So psychopaths, have like this callous type of attitude, and the way that they act out against society. And they do that as like a sense of pleasure because they don't like to be bored. So sometimes people get the terms mixed up and they'll use them interchangeably, but they are two different things. So they can have both at the same time. And so it gets confusing. But psychopaths, you know, they're a much smaller part of the population. Sociopathy is found more commonly. So it's still kind of a small part of our population. So it's just interesting to see the similarities and the differences. So sociopaths can have tendencies of carelessness and criminal behavior, just like the psychopath possibly could. But the chances are they will do it if it helps them in some way, not because they're deriving pleasure from it. So their reason for doing things is different. So it's important to understand. So antisocial personality is just that mental disorder where they consistently have no regard between right and wrong. They'll ignore the rights of others. Also, ignore the rights of society, and they like to antagonize. They'll manipulate people. They can be harsh, callous, completely cold, indifferent to people, and they definitely do not like to show guilt or remorse for whatever it is that they're doing. Their behavior to them, there's nothing wrong with it in their eyes. So there's a clear distinction that these sociopaths violate the law, engage in antisocial activities because they just have no regard for it, not because they want to gain pleasure from it like a psychopath would. The psychopath would get pleasure from it. The sociopath just does it. It's just something they want to do, so they're going to do it. So on top of that, the symptoms of antisocial personality disorder, there's a disregard between right and wrong. They constantly lie persistently. They love to deceive and exploit other people. They're very disrespectful. They will tap into their charm and use that to manipulate for personal gain, self-fulfilling pleasure. They can often be very arrogant, and it seems like they feel that they're above everybody else. So they have that superiority complex, and they are also very opinionated. They will say what they believe, and they believe it's golden. So they often have recurring problems with the law because they just want to do whatever they want to do. So it can lead to criminal behavior when you don't follow the rules of society. So they'll often do that with relationships too. They won't respect any boundaries. They can be very impulsive. They don't like to plan ahead. They can start to become agitated, respond with aggression, violence, verbal, emotional, physical. They can be very hostile. So they have a lack of empathy for others, just like the narcissist. The narcissist has varying degrees, but they have a lack of empathy. They also don't have any remorse because they don't have that empathy. So they love to take risks that don't necessarily need to be taken. A lot of dangerous behaviors going on. And they just don't care about the safety of others or themselves. So they can, drink and drive and not look at who they might harm, whether they'd harm themselves or others. They just want to do what they want to do. So their relationships are low quality, often abusive, and they just don't look at the negative consequences of their behavior. They don't want to learn from it. They don't want to change. They just want to do what they want to do. It's almost like they're set in motion and they just want to go. So they repeatedly will fail to fulfill financial obligations. Maybe they're not paying their bills on time, or being smart about their money. They can lack sticking to fulfilling work commitments. They're constantly irresponsible. So it's almost a certain thing that somebody with an antisocial personality disorder in their adulthood will have had symptoms of conduct disorder in their childhood. So we can kind of see a trend as the kids are growing up. Like I said, I'm a teacher. I'm really paying attention. I'm this time not in an urban school. I'm in a little more affluent school. And I'm really paying attention to the differences between the kids. There are a couple troubled kids, but for the most part, it's like night and day. So stressors in childhood really affect a kid. So if you're with somebody, who has some of these personality disorders, it affects your kids. It affects your kids. So just take that to heart. So a child who has a conduct order is more likely to be sociopathic than another child who had a better upbringing, free from the mental turmoil that goes on. So there are some traits during childhood that can indicate the possibility that they might develop antisocial personality disorders within adulthood. So you should look for pyromania, which is setting things on fire. Also, the children, if they're hurting animals or even younger children, that might be a signal that this child really needs some attention. Like not just cuddles. They need like guidance or a therapist. They can often be very destructive of property. They don't like to follow rules. So as kids are growing up, you do have some stressors, you do have some things that you have to work through. But if they're starting to set things on fire, or getting a thrill out of hurting animals, or not following, rules, just pretty much any, and being destructive, that's something to think of. So, they're still doing a lot of study. So there are some serious similarities between psychopathy and sociopathy. There's this ongoing pattern of disregard, also the violation of the rights of other people. They manifest through 3 or more of the following, or habitual or continual behaviors. So they really violate a lot of criminal laws. They can be pretty serious violations. They can lie, swindle, trick people into things, very deceitful, and they do that for personal gain or pleasure. So there is a method to their madness, but it is madness, and it's not a way to live. They can be quite aggressive, irritable, and they often can be physical abusers. They can physically assault other people. So with this disregard for the safety of themselves or others, it can be pretty scary. They don't uphold a lot of things in adulthood. They can't really maintain a family, or the family duties, which includes things like jobs, financial obligations, relationships. And they just, with this, they don't really have the guilt or remorse. And to have a healthy relationship, we have to realize not only the difference between right and wrong, but also how it affects people. Sometimes when we know how it's going to affect people, it makes us make a wiser choice on how to proceed. Because even if we could get away with something, we're like, that can have devastating effects on somebody else that can't do it. And we hold ourselves back, keeps us accountable. So there are some tests, but it's they do have a rating scale. which is filled out by a clinician. They also use a diagnostic interview, and it's considered very reliable. But with people lie sometimes, and it's really hard to get all the concrete evidence that we need, but we do see a lot of similarities and tendencies. And I just thought it was interesting that you know, how people can have more than one mental illness at a time. That's why they have that cluster B. Also, you know, with narcissists, they can go between grandiose and vulnerable. They're just trying to fill their need, whether they're psychopaths, sociopaths. If you notice a pattern, it's all reflected on them. And that's not a healthy way to live. It destroys society. And something's got to change. Something's got to change. We do have to figure out how to all get along in this life. But we also have to protect ourselves. You know, if people aren't willing to do what needs to be done to have some balance in society, it can't be dog eat dog world. We're all going to destroy each other if that's how we all live. There has to be rule and order. So please like and subscribe, comment below, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.